In our communities, we all know people who go above and beyond to help others. They're not incentivised by financial reward. They don't look for public recognition. But whether it's spending time raising awareness of an issue, helping those less fortunate, or working to improve their neighbourhoods, there are people amongst us who are selfless enough to go the extra mile. Welcome to The Extra Mile, a new UTV podcast celebrating those unsung heroes who help benefit our communities. I'm Carol Jordan. Today I'm joined by Alma White, the founder of Caleb's Cause, a campaign for legislation for education, health and care plans to be implemented in Northern Ireland for young people over the age of 19 who have complex needs. Alma has graced the halls of Stormont, spoken to councils across the region and political leaders to further the cause, as well as spending countless hours lobbying to secure a fair and equitable future for all. Thanks so much for joining me, Alma.
Thank you for inviting me.
So first of all, tell me about Caleb's Cause. How did this come about?
So Caleb's Cause kind of started over a year ago. My son is called Caleb. He's 17 years old. He attends a special school in Belfast. And really it was through him inspiring me, I suppose, and thinking about his future, and then also seeing the gaps of what exists really for a future for a lot of our young people with disabilities. And it just made me think I have to do something to try and help families like ours.
Now, you describe how this idea came to you very quickly. You were sitting in the kitchen, were you, with your husband?
Yeah.
When did it sort of strike you that actually creating this campaign might be something really positive to do?
I think, when you actually start to delve into the provision out there, I started to talk to families, and I just got a real sense of the need to spread a bit of hope. And also to make political figures and leaders aware of just how stark this situation is here in Northern Ireland, and it's all over Northern Ireland. And I think just the need to address the issues that are there were really, really important to me. So as my husband said, as we sat at the kitchen table one night, he said, "Oh no, you've got that look." And I said, "I have to do something." And he's like, "Okay." So it kind of spiraled from there. And then I took a year out of my job and just decided to throw everything I could at it. And try to help families. So
did you have a background in campaigning? Were you used to doing this type of work?
Absolutely not. If anything, I shy away from cameras. If I could do it behind a screen, I probably would. But it's one of these things where I feel very strongly that it's the right thing to do. I feel very strongly that it's an issue that needs to be raised and talked about and really put into the spotlight. And it's an issue that needs to be acted upon at this point because we're beyond crisis. So I think sometimes you're kind of thrown into situations and you learn as you go, and it really has been learning as I go. I didn't really have a clue what I was taking on, but when you have a passion and you care for people, you'll do it.
And what's the sort of the primary aim of Caleb's Cause, and what's the last year been like for you?
Caleb's Cause, I think, what we're looking for are laws, new laws. The UK, well, in England and Wales, there's legislation post-19 for young people with disabilities, and it goes right up to 25. Now, I feel in Northern Ireland, for complex needs, our young people have the needs that they have are lifelong. Their disabilities don't disappear at 19. And so really there's a massive gap there of young people being left behind. It's almost like they're the invisible population. They reach 19, it's a massive cliff edge. They leave a 5-day provision of attending school, and then they're just sort of thrown out into this world of very little provision. Now, I will say there are amazing charities out there who fill the gap, and without them we would have even less. But it's just such an important thing to raise and to actually push forward. So this past year for me has been, it's been a roller coaster. It's been very emotional. It's been very, very hard. It's been very lonely at times. I think when you take something like this on, you really don't know the kind of... you think you know the situation, but the families I've talked to, the situations that I've heard about have been really, really hard to hear, the pain and the crisis that some families are in, and just really the depth of issues that exist. But it's also been so joyful because I've met people that have become really, really close friends, mums from all around the country. It's brought communities together. It's brought siblings together, families together, and there's been a real sense of hope. I know my T-shirt says hope, and that was always kind of what I wanted to portray throughout Caleb's Cause. That's what we want to do. But it's been a massive learning curve as well.
It must be really emotional because obviously Caleb's Cause is named, as you said, after your son. You know, as parents, we always worry about what our kids are going to end up doing, you know, hoping that they have a happy and healthy life. But I think it's fair to say that for parents of children with complex needs, those questions about the future are even more nuanced, you know, I mean, arguably even more worrisome or anxiety-inducing. I mean, the families that you've spoken to, how worried are they for their children? Because you've described it before as a cliff edge.
Yeah. It really is. It's worried, they're exhausted. I think you when you have your child who attends a special school, you put them on a bus at 3, the big yellow bus, and you don't know who they're going to, you don't know who the driver is. You have to trust at the start of the process, really, when they're very, very young. And it's just a constant battle throughout their life. You're expected to trust strangers. And don't get me wrong, you know, special schools are incredible. The staff that we have had in Caleb's life they've changed his life and changed ours. But the fact is, parents are always... It's almost like they're always on a cliff edge because you never stop worrying. The next stage of their life comes, the next assessment. You know, you're always having to jump through hoops. You're always having to speak up, and you're always having to share the negative. You never really get to share the joyful you know, parts of being a parent to a young person. And I think that's really, really hard. And there's no real certain path. There's no clear path for our young people. And it doesn't stop at 19. You know, the transition from children to adult services is just... It's horrendous. It's a really, really difficult transition, and it should be a really happy time. You know, you come up to 19, and I have 2 daughters, you know, one that's going to go to university, and I have a daughter studying GCSEs, and, you know, they've the world ahead of them. And yet for Caleb, it's nothing but that sick feeling in the pit of your stomach. What is going to happen to him? And then you start to worry about what happens when we're not here. What happens when we die and there's no one to take care of them, who will love them like we love them? And that is it's one of the biggest fears that parents have.
So you have that battle, you know, just being a parent of a child with you know, complex needs. How then do you take on this other battle, which is to further this cause, to raise awareness, to fight for this legislation? How do you juggle the 2 massive workloads, really?
Yeah, I think last year was a massive learning curve for me. I think I threw everything at the campaign to the point where I probably burned out a little bit. I became very, very emotionally attached to it. I wasn't sleeping well. It was eat, sleep, thinking, okay, what post can I do tomorrow? What can I do to raise this issue? And my big pressure was keeping it on the agenda. It was getting the foundations of Caleb's Cause laid so that all the politicians, all the MLAs, all the leaders know about it. When they hear it now, they know that what the campaign is for. So there was, I suppose I put myself under a lot of pressure because I desperately wanted to help and I wanted to find a solution, really, I suppose. but it's really not it's not an easy process to go through to do this. Putting my family out in the media, in the spotlight. You can sometimes receive judgment, and I've said it at the start of this interview. If I could do it behind a closed door, I would. But I think it's been really, really important for me to share about Caleb and about our life, because it's allowed other families to say, oh, wow, we're feeling the same. And then they relate. And there's been this real joyful community that have come together, especially on our Facebook page. I started off with 2 people. I've now got almost 2.7 thousand followers in just over a year. We had a petition that's over 12,500 signatures, and people they're just starting to come from everywhere, because it doesn't matter where you're from or where you live. You all have that common theme and that common bond, because disabilities don't discriminate. It can happen to anybody.
Now, you say that you gave up your job for this. You took a year out.
Yeah.
Apart from the financial impact, has there been any other impact, either negative or positive, from running this campaign over the last year?
I think, I worked in a special school, so I left my job that I loved, and the young people I met and worked with. I've been a classroom assistant when my children were young. I decided to be a classroom assistant so that I could be home for them in the afternoons, and it worked really well. And so I think it was huge for me to step away from my job, but I felt like being in my job and also trying to give myself 100% to this, I was able to say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to take that time away, and I'm going to throw everything I can at this. And there have been negative things. I think you knock on lots of doors and you think you're going to get the help. I really naively thought it would take no time. Politicians and leaders would hear my story, hear the stories of others and what I was sharing, and they would just jump at the chance to help, and it would all be fixed in a short time. But it's not how it works. And I've had to really learn that this is probably going to be a long-term investment, but not one that I'll ever regret.
And how do you go from, sitting at your kitchen table and thinking, right, I'm going to start this campaign, to talking to the highest level of politician in Northern Ireland? How do you navigate the political system, going from almost no knowledge to actually being face to face with them?
I have been very fortunate. I reached out to somebody at the start of this campaign who ran a campaign themselves, Dahi's Law, and Martin, Dahi's dad, has been a tremendous friend. Actually, believe it or not, we've never actually met. But we have had conversations and emails, and I sort of said, am I crazy to do this? And he's just been a lovely support to me. And when I needed it, he was there. And even, with all that he has going on in his life, he took the time to say, Alma, you can do this, just keep going. So support like that has just been tremendous. And the support of mums who have come together and just said, what can I do? How can we help? People have bought the T-shirts, and I didn't really, it took me about a year to say, people started saying, hey, can we get your T-shirts? And I said, I can't buy them for everyone, but I hate to ask people to, because there's no money coming to me for this at all. But it's just been so lovely that I was able to say, look, you can buy it at this place. And people are now walking around with our sweatshirts and our T-shirts on and talking about Caleb's cause. So that for me has just been a huge, huge support, and it spurred me on.
And we talk about support and the lessons that you've learned from Martine. If there's somebody listening or watching this today and thinking to themselves, there is something that I'm passionate about in my life that I want to raise awareness of, what would your advice to them be?
Go for it. You don't need to have a degree in campaigning. I think you need to have a passion, and you need to have a love. And I think there's nothing more powerful than the love of a parent. And that is really what drives you to do this. And the lives that you come into contact with and the people that you talk to. And it is exhausting. And I think you have to remember that it won't happen overnight. And it is one day at a time, but it's something I will always be so, so glad that I've done.
Excellent. And you're doing it for Caleb.
Absolutely.
Just wondering about the role of social media in all of this. You know, there are a lot of keyboard warriors, or what people call keyboard warriors. A lot of people take to social media when they're not happy about something. How has social media played a role in the campaigning work that you've done?
Yeah, you know, I have to say 99% of the time it's been really, really positive. Like I said, there's a way of reaching people. And I think through social media, you know, there is a way that it can be very positive. I think it also depends on how you engage with people. People are always going to have opinions of me and what I'm doing. And there will be people that will criticise and have criticised. And there's been days I've just burst into tears and said, I'm not doing it anymore, you know. But you kind of just, you become stronger and you say to yourself, why am I doing it? I'm doing it for young people like my son and other families, and it's what drives you. But social media has been very, very unique for me, and it has reached families and people that would maybe not have heard about Caleb's Cause. And so Facebook, Instagram, I didn't even know how to do a story. I didn't know much about Twitter, but it's also reached politicians and it's got the word out, and it's allowed me to share a lot of just a lot of facts and a lot of lived experience that people have been able to share their stories and allowed me to be their voice. And I think that's been really, really positive.
Brilliant. And where does Caleb's Cause go from here? What are your hopes for the future?
Oh, my hopes for the future would be legislation. I would love to see a care plan. I think the last legislation framework that we had was the Chronically Ill and Disabled Persons Act, which was 1978. So that gives you an idea of how long it's been since that was updated. I would love to see a care plan for our young people coming out of special school, one that is lifelong, that connects the dots, that connects the departments, and it gives our young people a future. My son is never going to be able to have a job, and that's not me putting him down, it's just realistic. He's not going to be able to take care of himself and live independently. He is going to need a lot of support, and I think for parents to be able to know that they have a system of hope and support when they're no longer here. I think one thing I would say is that the pressure on the family left behind, like siblings who want a career, may want to go on and get married and have a family. And unfortunately, you know, my daughters will say, how's this going to work? And what are we going to do? You can't just leave him. And my fear is that then, with no system and no plan and no support, it then falls to the next generation and they're giving up careers. And, you know, so I think for Caleb's Cause, it's pushing. I did a TED Talk back in June in Stormont, and one of the things I have tried to really push in the message for Caleb's Cause going forward is you have a voice. Everybody has a voice. So, you know, please find your voice and use it to help others find theirs. And I just think that's really, really important. And hopefully Caleb's Cause will be the platform to do that going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alma. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Best of luck with the campaign. That's it from this edition of The Extra Mile. Don't forget to subscribe and share. And you can watch us anytime on ITVX. Just search for UTV. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.